Camera opens on a woman in her early 30s, sitting in a modern apartment with large windows overlooking Portland. She's dressed simply but professionally, sipping coffee from a mug that reads, "Worth Wealth." I never thought I'd be the kind of person who gets uninvited from Christmas dinner, especially not by my own mother. But life has a funny way of revealing people's true colors when money gets involved. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Mitchell. Everyone calls me Jess. At 30 years old, I was building what most people would consider a successful life. I'd worked my way up to become a financial advisor at a boutique firm in Portland, helping clients make smart decisions with their money. The irony of what happened with my own family isn't lost on me. Growing up in Lakeside, a picture-perfect suburb outside Portland, appearances were everything to my mother, Diane. Our house was always spotless when guests came over. We wore coordinated outfits for family photos. Every Christmas card looked like it could be on the cover of a magazine. Behind that perfect façade, though, was a family obsessed with status. My sister Kayla was always the golden child. 2 years younger than me, she seemed to effortlessly embody everything my mother valued: beauty, charm, and the ability to attract a wealthy husband. When she married Tyler Harrison at 25, my mother was ecstatic. Tyler's family owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Pacific Northwest, and suddenly, family conversations revolved around the Harrison name and connections. I took a different path. After college, I moved to downtown Portland and focused on building my career. I lived in a modest apartment, drove a practical car, and invested most of my income rather than spending it on designer clothes or lavish vacations. My mother never understood this approach. "When are you going to get a place in the West Hills, Jess?" she'd ask during our increasingly infrequent calls. "You're not getting any younger, and that apartment screams, struggling millennial." I'd laugh it off, trying to explain that I was making intentional choices with my money, not struggling. But the narrative in her mind was set. Kayla was successful because she married wealth, while I was the disappointing daughter who couldn't keep up. Things shifted dramatically about 3 years ago. One evening, I received a call from my father, Robert. This was unusual. Dad typically let Mom handle family communications. "Jess," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your mother would kill me if she knew I was calling you about this, but we're in a bit of a financial situation." The story unfolded slowly. Dad's construction business had been struggling for years, but they'd kept up appearances by refinancing the house multiple times. Now, with interest rates rising and business still slow, they were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings. "Does Kayla know?" I asked. "God, no," Dad said quickly. "Your mother doesn't want anyone to know, especially not Kayla and Tyler. She's afraid it would make us look. Well, you know how your mother is about appearances." I did know. And despite our complicated relationship, I couldn't stand the thought of my parents losing their home, the house I'd grown up in, where all our family memories were made. "How much do you need to catch up on the payments?" I asked. Dad named a figure that made my stomach drop: $17,500. Not an impossible sum, but substantial enough that it would mean liquidating a significant portion of my investment portfolio. "I'll help," I said finally. "But Dad, this can't be a one-time fix. We need to look at your overall financial situation and make some long-term changes." Dad agreed readily, relief evident in his voice. We arranged for me to visit that weekend to go through their finances in detail. Before hanging up, I added one condition. We need to be honest about this. No more hiding the reality from everyone. There was a long pause. "Let me talk to your mother," he said finally. When I arrived that Saturday, Mom acted as though I was there for a normal visit. She'd prepared an elaborate lunch, set the dining room table with her best china, and even put fresh flowers in my old bedroom. Not a hint that their financial world was crumbling. After lunch, I gently brought up the reason for my visit. Dad called me about the mortgage situation. I want to help, but we need to go through everything. Mom's face hardened. Robert had no right to burden you with our temporary cash flow issue. We would have figured it out. 3 months of missed mortgage payments isn't a temporary cash flow issue, Mom. It's serious. And I'm not burdened. I want to help. But I need to see the complete picture. What followed was 5 hours of financial archaeology. I discovered credit card statements with balances over $30,000, a home equity line of credit that was maxed out, and a second mortgage they'd taken 2 years ago that Dad hadn't even mentioned. Their total debt, outside of the original mortgage, was approaching $180,000, all to maintain the lifestyle my mother deemed appropriate. "This is worse than Dad indicated," I said, trying to keep judgment out of my voice. "We need to make some major changes, starting with dramatically reducing your monthly expenses." Mom sat stiffly in her chair, looking as though I'd suggested they start living in a cardboard box. "What exactly are you proposing?" I laid out a plan: selling their luxury SUV for something more economical, canceling country club memberships, cutting back on lavish Christmas gifts and expensive dinner parties. Basic financial planning steps that any of my clients would understand. "Absolutely not," Mom said, standing abruptly. "What would people think? What would Kayla and Tyler think?" "They'd think you're being financially responsible," I countered. "Besides, wouldn't they rather know the truth than have you lose the house?" "You don't understand anything about maintaining relationships in our circle," Mom said dismissively. "This is why you're still single, living in that tiny apartment. You don't understand how the real world works." The conversation deteriorated from there. Eventually, we reached a compromise. I would provide the $17,500 to bring the mortgage current, plus another $5,000 to clear the most pressing credit card debt. In exchange, they agreed to meet with me monthly to review their finances and gradually implement some of my suggested changes. For about 6 months, this arrangement worked reasonably well. I'd visit once a month, go through their statements, and offer guidance. Dad was receptive and made genuine efforts to cut back on expenses related to his business. Mom was less cooperative but seemed to grudgingly accept the need for some moderation. Then came what I now think of as the designer purse incident. During one of our monthly reviews, I noticed a credit card charge for $3,200 at a luxury boutique. When I asked about it, Mom casually mentioned she'd purchased a designer handbag for Kayla's birthday. $3,000 for a purse? I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. "Mom, that's more than your mortgage payment." "It's an investment piece," she said defensively. "Besides, all of Kayla's friends get gifts like this from their others. I wasn't going to embarrass her with something cheap." "You know what's really embarrassing?" I shot back, my patience finally wearing thin. "Having your house foreclosed on because you're buying luxury gifts you can't afford." The argument escalated quickly. Mom accused me of being jealous of Kayla, of not understanding their social obligations, of trying to control them with my financial assistance. Dad sat silently, staring at his hands, offering neither support nor opposition. I left that day feeling defeated. The next month, when I called to schedule our financial review, Mom informed me that they were taking a break from my financial surveillance. I tried reasoning with her, but she wouldn't budge. When Thanksgiving approached, I was surprised to receive an invitation to dinner. Perhaps the cooling-off period had helped. I arrived with a bottle of reasonably priced wine and a homemade pumpkin pie, hoping for reconciliation. The house was decorated impeccably as always. Kayla and Tyler were already there, Tyler mixing drinks while Kayla showed off photos of their recent trip to the Maldives. My Aunt Nancy, Mom's sister, gave me a warm hug and whispered, "Hang in there. which should have been my first clue that something was off. Dinner started pleasantly enough. We passed dishes family style, complimented the food, and engaged in carefully neutral conversation. Then Tyler mentioned they were considering buying a vacation home in Bend. "That's wonderful," Mom gushed. "You know, if you need any advice on finances for a second home, you should talk to Jess. She's become quite the expert on telling people how to spend their money." The table went quiet. I took a sip of water, trying to decide whether to engage or let it pass. "I only give financial advice when I'm asked," I said finally, "or when someone calls me crying about losing their house." Mom's face flushed. "Well, we wouldn't have been in that position if your father's business hadn't hit a rough patch. These things happen in real business, not just moving money around on spreadsheets like you do." "What's going on?" Kayla looked between us, confused. "Is something wrong with the house?" "Nothing's wrong now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Mom said quickly, "Just a temporary cash flow issue earlier this year. Your sister helped out, and now she thinks that gives her the right to monitor every penny we spend. Because you were 3 months from foreclosure." The words burst out before I could stop them. "And instead of making necessary changes, you're still spending thousands on designer purses and keeping up appearances." The dinner devolved rapidly after that revelation. Kayla was shocked, Tyler uncomfortable, Dad silent, and Mom furious. Aunt Nancy tried to mediate, but the damage was done. The carefully constructed façade of Mitchell family financial stability had cracked wide open. As I was leaving, Mom followed me to the door. "I hope you're satisfied," she hissed. "You've embarrassed us all with your need to air our private business." "Someone needed to tell the truth," I replied, exhaustion washing over me. "I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not." "Well," she said, drawing herself up, "perhaps it would be best if you didn't join us for Christmas this year. Kayla and Tyler are hosting at their new house, and we don't need your negative attitude ruining everyone's holiday." Despite everything, her words stung. "You're uninviting me from Christmas? Your own daughter? Until you learn to be supportive? Instead of judgmental, yes. Sometimes being family means protecting each other's dignity, not just their bank accounts." I drove home that night with tears streaming down my face, wondering how trying to help my parents had turned me into a family outcast. The following Monday, I was reviewing a client's file when my assistant mentioned a property that had just been listed in Lakeside. "Isn't that your hometown?" she asked. Curious, I pulled up the listing. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the address. It was my parents' house. They had put it on the market without telling me. The listing described it as a motivated seller situation with price to move quickly in the description, real estate code for financial distress. I called my father immediately, but the call went to voicemail. Same with my mother. Finally, I called the listing agent directly, introducing myself as a potentially interested buyer. The agent was refreshingly candid. The sellers were facing imminent foreclosure and needed to sell quickly to pay off the mortgage before the bank took possession. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the house where I'd grown up, the height markers penciled on the kitchen doorframe, the backyard tree where Dad had built us a swing, the window seat in my old bedroom where I'd read hundreds of books during rainy Oregon winters. The thought of strangers living there, or worse, the bank selling it at auction, made my chest tight. By morning, I'd made a decision that would change everything. I contacted my financial planner and looked at liquidating a significant portion of my investment portfolio. Between my savings, investments, and a portion of my 401k that I could access without penalty, I could make a cash offer on the house. It would mean postponing my own plans to buy property for several years, but something about the situation felt right. Working through a different real estate agent, I made an anonymous cash offer for the full asking price, with a request for an expedited closing and a condition that allowed the current owners to remain in the property as tenants for up to 6 months while they found new housing. My agent assured me that such an offer would be irresistible to motivated sellers. She was right. My offer was accepted within hours, because I'd structured the purchase through an LLC specifically created. For this purpose, my parents had no idea I was their buyer and soon-to-be landlord. The closing happened quickly. I signed the final papers on December 23rd, just 2 days before the Christmas gathering I'd been uninvited from. As the keys were handed over to me, I felt a strange mix of emotions: satisfaction, anxiety, and a lingering sadness that our family relationships had deteriorated to this point. On Christmas morning, I sat in my apartment looking at the keys to my parents' house, now my house. After an hour of deliberation, I drove to Lakeside and parked, a block away from Kayla and Tyler's new home. Through the large front windows, I could see the family gathered around their Christmas tree, opening presents. Mom was smiling, seemingly without a care in the world. I almost drove away. Then I remembered how she'd excluded me from this day, how she'd hidden the house listing from me, how she'd rejected my help while their financial situation worsened. I grabbed the folder from my passenger seat and walked to the door. Tyler answered, surprise evident on his face. "Jess, we weren't expecting you." "I know," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "But I have a Christmas gift that couldn't wait." Everyone looked up as I entered the living room. Kayla seemed pleased to see me, Aunt Nancy positively delighted, and Dad vaguely uncomfortable. Mom's expression hardened immediately. "Jessica," she said coolly, "we discussed this. Today isn't a good day for—" "Actually," I interrupted, "I think today is the perfect day for honesty and new beginnings." I opened the folder and removed the deed to their house. My house now. "I brought a gift for you and Dad." Mom looked confused as I handed the document to Dad. He adjusted his reading glasses and studied it, his expression changing from confusion to shock. "What is it?" Mom demanded, reaching for the paper. "It's the deed to your house," I explained, as she snatched it from Dad's hands. "You might notice the new owner's name at the bottom." Mom scanned the document, her face paling as she reached the signature line with my LLC's name and my signature as the managing member. "I don't understand." "It's simple," I said, keeping my voice level. "I bought your house. The foreclosure has been stopped. The mortgage is paid off, and you and Dad can stay there as long as you need to, rent-free, while you get your finances in order." The room went completely silent. Kayla's mouth had dropped open. Tyler was staring at me with newfound respect. Aunt Nancy was unsuccessfully trying to hide a smile behind her coffee mug. "How—" Mom's voice trailed off. "How did you afford this?" "I told you I was doing well," I said simply. "Just because I don't flaunt my success doesn't mean it isn't there. I've been investing wisely for years, living below my means, and building wealth instead of just the appearance of it." Dad stood up then and did something unexpected. He hugged me. Hard. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick, with emotion. "I don't deserve this." "You're welcome, Dad," I said, hugging him back. Mom remained seated, the deed clutched in her hand, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice unusually small. "Why would you do this after how I treated you?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd rehearsed in my mind repeatedly during the drive over. "Because that's what family does, Mom. Real family. Not the kind that puts up a perfect front while crumbling inside. Not the kind that excludes members who tell uncomfortable truths. Real family shows up even when it's hard, even when they've been hurt." Tears welled in her eyes, genuine tears, not the performative ones I'd seen her use at social functions. "I've been terrible to you," she admitted quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "You have. But now we have a chance to start over, a chance to build a relationship based on honesty instead of appearances. The rest of Christmas Day unfolded in a way I never could have predicted. We talked, really talked, about money, about values, about the pressure to keep up appearances that had driven my parents to the brink of financial ruin. Kayla admitted she'd always felt burdened by being the successful daughter, constantly needing to project perfection. Tyler revealed that despite his family's wealth, he respected my approach to finances more. Aunt Nancy shared stories about how her own modest lifestyle had allowed her to retire early and travel the world. As we helped clean up after dinner, Mom pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about what you said about honesty," she began hesitantly. "There's something else you should know. Your father's business hasn't just hit a rough patch. It's failing, has been for years. All this time we've been trying to hide it from everyone, including ourselves." This explained so much about their financial spiral. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "We can figure this out together." Over the following months, our family underwent a transformation more valuable than any property deed. Dad closed his struggling business and, with my encouragement, started consulting instead, sharing his construction expertise without the overhead of running a company. Mom took a part-time job at a local boutique, discovering she actually enjoyed working and having her own income for the first time in decades. I maintained ownership of the house but never charged them rent. Instead, I set up a separate account where they deposited what would have been reasonable rent payments each month. After a year, I surprised them by revealing that the account was actually in their names, a forced savings plan that had accumulated enough for a modest but comfortable retirement fund. Kayla and I developed a closer relationship than we'd ever had growing up. Without Mom's constant comparisons creating competition between us, we found we actually liked each other. She eventually confessed that she'd always envied my independence and financial savvy. Last Christmas, a year after the deed reveal, we gathered at my parents' house, still technically mine, but always their home. The decorations were simpler, the gifts more thoughtful but less extravagant, the atmosphere infinitely warmer. As we sat around the tree, Mom raised her glass in a toast. "To Jess," she said, meeting my eyes with genuine warmth, "who taught us that true wealth isn't about what you have, but about what you're willing to give. Thank you for buying this house, but more importantly, thank you for rebuilding our family." I often think about that moment when I'm advising clients. I tell them that financial planning isn't just about accumulating money, it's about creating the freedom to make choices aligned with your deepest values. Sometimes the best investment isn't one that shows up in your portfolio statement. Sometimes it's an investment in healing, in family, in becoming the person who shows up with courage and compassion, even when it's easier to stay away. The house in Lakeside will always be my first major real estate purchase. But what I really bought that Christmas wasn't a property. It was the chance to rewrite our family story, to transform a narrative of appearances and pretense into one of authenticity and resilience. And that has made all the difference. Camera pans out as Jess smiles, touching the house keys that now hang as an ornament on her own Christmas tree. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's video will reveal what happened when my parents discovered exactly how I could afford to buy their house, and the unexpected business venture that came from all of this. You won't want to miss it. The morning after that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. Being excluded from Christmas stung more than I wanted to admit, but beneath that hurt was something else. A realization that my relationship with my parents had been built on financial transactions for years. I just hadn't seen it clearly until now. I made myself coffee and stared out at the Portland skyline, watching the winter fog roll in over the Willamette River. My phone had been silent since I'd left Lakeside yesterday. No apologetic text from Dad. No reconciliatory call from Mom. Not even a message from Kayla. It was as if drawing attention to their financial reality had made me temporarily invisible. The familiar chime of an email notification broke my thoughts. It was from Evergreen Financial Group, a rival advisory firm where my colleague Rachel had recently taken a position. Still interested in that VP role we discussed? Let's grab coffee this week. The timing felt almost cosmic. I'd mentioned the potential job change to my parents months ago, hoping they might show interest in this major career move. Mom had immediately changed the subject to Kayla's recent kitchen renovation. Now, with family ties fraying, perhaps it was the perfect time to consider a change. Rachel and I met at a quiet cafe near Pioneer Square that afternoon. "You look like you've had a rough weekend," she observed, sliding into the booth. "Family stuff still?" I nodded, giving her an abbreviated version of the Thanksgiving debacle and my Christmas disinvitation. Rachel and I had been friends since college, and she was one of the few people who truly understood the Mitchell family dynamics. "So they're happy to take your money, but heaven forbid you suggest they change their spending habits," she summarized. Classic. "Exactly," I said, grateful for her straightforward assessment. "But enough about my dysfunctional family. Tell me more about this VP position." The job sounded perfect. Higher salary, more autonomy, and the opportunity to develop my own client acquisition strategy. The only downside was travel. I'd need to spend at least 1 week per month in their Seattle office. "Think about it," Rachel said as we parted. "But don't wait too long. They're interviewing other candidates next week." Driving home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I'd been allowing my parents' financial drama to consume my emotional energy for months. Maybe some distance, both physical and emotional, was exactly what I needed. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual, intending to clear my schedule for an impromptu trip to Seattle later that week. As I sorted through emails, my assistant Dana knocked on my door. "There's a Mr. Mitchell here to see you," she said. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." My heart rate quickened. "My father?" Dana nodded. "Should I tell him you're busy?" I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. "No, send him in." Dad looked older than he had at Thanksgiving, his shoulders slumped beneath his worn leather jacket. He clutched a manila envelope in hands that seemed more weathered than I remembered. "Jess," he said, his voice carrying none of its usual forced cheerfulness. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What's going on, Dad? Is everything okay?" He sat heavily, placing the envelope on my desk. "Not really. Your mother doesn't know I'm here." That was unexpected. My parents had always presented a unified front, even when it was clear Dad was just going along with Mom's decisions. "What's in the envelope?" Dad pushed it toward me. "See for yourself." Inside was a stack of documents, bank statements, credit card bills, and a notice of default from their mortgage lender dated just 3 days ago. The situation was far worse than I'd realized. They weren't just behind on mortgage payments. They were underwater on the house itself, owing significantly more than its current market value. "I don't understand," I said, flipping through the pages. "I gave you enough money to catch up on the mortgage. What happened?" Dad stared at his hands. "We used most of it to pay off Tyler's father." "What?" The statement was so unexpected that for a moment I thought I'd misheard him. When Kayla and Tyler first got engaged, James Harrison, Tyler's father, offered to invest in my business. It seemed like a godsend at the time. Your mother was thrilled about the connection to the Harrison family. Dad's voice grew quieter. The business was already struggling, but I thought with his investment I could turn things around. I felt a creeping dread. How much did he invest? $300,000. Dad's voice was barely audible now, with the understanding that if the business didn't show profit within 2 years, I'd repay the full amount, plus 10%. The math was easy and horrifying. "So you owe him $330,000? Dad nodded. The 2-year deadline was last month. He's been insistent about repayment. And Mom used the money I gave you for the mortgage to make a payment to James Harrison instead? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. Not all of it, Dad clarified, as if that made it better. We did catch up on 1 month of the mortgage, but yes, most of it went to James. Your mother thought if we showed good faith with a partial payment, he might extend the deadline. I pushed back from my desk, standing to look out my office window, as I absorbed this new information. The view of downtown Portland usually calmed me, but today it did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. Why didn't you tell me about this loan when we went through your finances? Dad's reflection in the window looked pained. Your mother didn't want Kayla to know her father-in-law was essentially keeping us afloat. She thought it might create tension in their marriage. I turned back to face him. Well, now you're facing foreclosure, Dad. What's the plan? His silence told me everything. There was no plan, just the desperate hope that I would once again step in and solve their financial problems. We thought maybe, he began hesitantly, with your connections in finance, you might know someone who could help refinance the house? Or perhaps loan us enough to satisfy James until the business recovers? Business recovery had been the perpetual carrot dangled just out of reach for years. We both knew it wasn't going to happen. Dad's construction company had been losing money consistently for the past decade, kept alive by increasingly desperate financial maneuvers. Dad, I said carefully, I think it's time to consider selling the house, downsize to something more manageable, use the proceeds to pay off as much debt as possible, and start fresh. The suggestion visibly distressed him. Your mother would never agree to that. Never. That house it's everything to her. It's the proof that we made it. That sentence captured my mother's worldview perfectly. Appearances over reality. Status over financial security. Then bankruptcy might be your only option, I said. At least that would halt the foreclosure process and give you time to figure things out. Dad looked horrified. Bankruptcy? Do you have any idea what that would do to our standing in the community? Your mother's social circle? It would destroy her. I sat back down, pushing the scattered documents into a neat pile. Financial? Realities don't care about social standing, Dad. You can face this on your terms now, or let the bank and creditors dictate the terms later. He stood abruptly. I shouldn't have come. I knew you wouldn't understand what's really at stake here. I understand perfectly, I replied, keeping my voice even. What I don't understand is why you and Mom are willing to sacrifice your future financial stability to maintain an illusion for people who ultimately don't care about you. Dad gathered the documents, shoving them haphazardly back into the envelope. Forget I asked. We'll figure it out ourselves. As he reached for the door, I had a flash of insight about what might really be driving his visit. Dad, I said, causing him to pause. Does James Harrison know about the foreclosure notice? His back stiffened. No. And if he finds out that you're about to lose your house while still owing him hundreds of thousands of dollars? Dad turned slowly. He'll call in the entire debt immediately, and when we can't pay, he'll make sure Tyler knows exactly what happened to his investment. It would devastate Kayla's marriage. Finally, the real fear emerged. Not the loss of the house itself, but the potential damage to Kayla's relationship with the wealthy family they'd worked so hard to impress. I'll think about what might be done, I said finally. But Dad, this can't keep happening. We need a permanent solution, not another temporary patch. Relief flooded his features. Thank you, Jess. I knew you'd understand once I explained. After he left, I sat motionless at my desk, reviewing the complex web of financial deception my parents had constructed. Every solution they'd attempted involved maintaining appearances, rather than addressing the underlying issues. And now they expected me to find yet another way to prop up their façade. Dana knocked gently on my door. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just family complications, I said, forcing a smile. Can you clear my schedule for the rest of the day? I need to do some research. Once alone, I pulled out my laptop and began investigating options. Refinancing was impossible given their credit and income situation. Another personal loan from me would only disappear into the black hole of their debt. Bankruptcy would indeed solve some problems while creating others. Then I remembered a client who'd recently faced a similar situation. With an underwater mortgage, they'd negotiated a short sale with their bank, selling the property for less than was owed, with the bank agreeing to forgive the remaining balance rather than pursue foreclosure. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it might be the least painful option available. Mom and Dad could downsize to a rental, use whatever equity remained to make arrangements with James Harrison, and begin rebuilding their financial lives without the crushing mortgage. I drafted an email to a real estate attorney I trusted, scheduling a consultation for the following day. Then I called my father. I may have a solution, I explained, outlining the short sale concept. It would mean selling the house, but you'd, avoid foreclosure and the worst impacts of bankruptcy. His response was immediate and disheartening. Your mother will never agree to voluntarily sell the house. Never. Then she needs to understand the alternatives, I countered. Foreclosure is coming regardless. This way, you at least maintain some control over the process. I'll try to talk to her, he promised, though his tone lacked conviction. But don't get your hopes up. 2 days passed without word from either of my parents. I attended the YA meeting with the real estate attorney, gathering information about the short sale process should they eventually come around to the idea. On the third day, just as I was preparing for my trip to Seattle to interview for the VP position, my phone buzzed with a text from my Aunt Nancy. You should know your parents are listing the house. Not sure they've told you. I stared at the message in disbelief. After all the resistance they were selling, and hadn't bothered to inform me? A quick search on real estate listings confirmed it. The Mitchell family home had been listed that morning, with an asking price well below market value, and the ominous description, motivated sellers, all offers considered. I called my father immediately. No answer. Same with my mother's phone. Finally, I called the listing agent directly, pretending to be an interested buyer seeking details. Oh yes, it's a wonderful property, the agent gushed. The sellers are facing a tight timeline due to some financial constraints, so they're pricing it aggressively for a quick sale. How tight is the timeline? I asked. They need to close within 30 days to avoid foreclosure proceedings, the agent confided, clearly hoping the distress sale angle would motivate potential buyers. It's a fantastic opportunity for the right buyer. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. They'd listed the house without even telling me, after all my efforts to help them navigate this crisis. The hurt was quickly replaced by determination. If they were finally ready to face reality, I wanted to make sure they didn't compound their financial mistakes by accepting a lowball offer out of desperation. I called my financial advisor, discussing the possibility of liquidating a significant portion of my investment portfolio. The numbers were sobering. Purchasing my parents' house would mean postponing my own property, buying plans for years, and depleting most of my non-retirement savings. But it would also mean keeping the property in the family and potentially providing my parents with a path to financial stability if structured correctly. It's not the investment I'd recommend, my advisor cautioned, but I understand the emotional factors at play. If you decide to proceed, we should move quickly before they accept another offer. The Seattle interview was the next morning. I had planned to drive up that evening and stay overnight, but the house situation demanded immediate attention. I called Rachel. I need a huge favor, I explained. Can you ask them to reschedule the interview? Family emergency. Rachel sounded concerned. Everything okay? Not really, I admitted. My parents just listed their house for a distress sale without telling me, and I'm considering buying it to keep them from being taken advantage of. Her silence spoke volumes. Jess, I say this with love, but are you sure that's a good idea? You've already extended yourself considerably to help them. Probably not, I acknowledged, but I can't stand by and watch them lose everything, even if they've made some terrible decisions. Rachel sighed. I'll see what I can do about the interview, but promise me you'll think this through carefully before committing. After hanging up, I contacted a different real estate agent, one who had no connection to my parents, and asked her to represent me as a buyer. I explained the unusual circumstances and my desire to remain anonymous until the offer was accepted. You want to buy your parents' house without them knowing it's you? She clarified. That's unusual. It's complicated, I said, which seemed to be my family's permanent state of being. Can it be done? Absolutely. We can make the offer through an LLC created specifically for this purpose. They'll know the entity name, but not that you're behind it. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of activity. I established an LLC called Mitchell Heritage Holdings, liquidated investments, secured financing for the remaining amount, and submitted an all-cash offer for the full asking price with an expedited closing timeline and the unusual condition that the sellers could remain in the property as tenants for up to 6 months at a nominal rent. My agent called the following afternoon. They've accepted your offer, she announced. The listing agent says they're relieved to have such a clean offer with the rental arrangement. Apparently, they were concerned about where they would go after selling. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by anxiety about what I'd just committed to. I was now depleting my savings to purchase a house I didn't intend to live in, to help parents who hadn't even bothered to tell me they were selling. The closing was set for December 20th, just days before Christmas, the holiday gathering I'd been explicitly uninvited from. The timing felt both ironic and appropriate. As the closing date approached, I struggled with how to reveal myself as the buyer. Should I tell them before closing? Wait until afterward? The hurt of being excluded from Christmas still lingered, alongside frustration that they'd made such a significant decision without involving me after all I'd done to help. Rachel provided an unexpected perspective over lunch the week before closing. Maybe they didn't tell you because they were ashamed, she suggested. They've been fighting so hard to maintain this image of success. Selling the house is like admitting defeat. But I already knew about their financial problems, I pointed out. I'm the only one they've been honest with. Exactly, Rachel said. And maybe that honesty felt too vulnerable. Sometimes people pull away from the ones who know their truths, because facing that person means facing their reality. Her words resonated more than I wanted to admit. Perhaps Mom's Christmas disinvitation wasn't just about my refusal to finance their lifestyle. Perhaps it was about avoiding the one person who saw through the carefully constructed facade. The day before closing, I received a text from Kayla. Are you really not coming to Christmas? Mom says you're too busy with work to join us. So that was the story they were telling. Not that I'd been explicitly uninvited, but that I'd chosen work over family. The narrative preserved Mom's image as the perpetually supportive mother while casting me as the career-obsessed daughter too busy for family traditions. I wasn't invited, I replied simply. Kayla's response came quickly. What? Mom said she called you weeks ago about Christmas at my place. I considered sending screenshots of Mom's actual words at Thanksgiving but decided against it. It's complicated. We had a disagreement about financial matters. This is about the house, isn't it? Kayla wrote. Tyler told me they're selling. I had no idea things were so bad. So Tyler knew, but Mom hadn't told Kayla directly. The pattern of selective truth-telling continued. Yes, I confirmed. They're closing tomorrow. To who? Do you know? I hesitated before answering. An LLC, Mitchell Heritage Holdings. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. That sounds suspicious. Like a developer shell company. Are they getting a fair price? They're getting the full asking price, I assured her, carefully, avoiding mentioning my involvement. That revelation needed to happen at the right time, and a text conversation wasn't it. I'm worried about them, Kayla admitted. Mom's been acting strange, more controlling than usual, and Dad barely speaks anymore. This glimpse into their current state strengthened my resolve to follow through with the purchase. They needed stability now more than ever, even if they didn't yet recognize it was coming from me. They'll be okay, I texted back. The buyer is allowing them to stay in the house for up to 6 months while they figure out next steps. That's unusually generous in this market, Kayla noted. Listen, about Christmas, you should come. Whatever happened between you and Mom, it's still family. And honestly, I could use your support right now. Things with Tyler's family have been tense since his dad's investment in Dad's company went south. So Kayla did know about the investment. Interesting that Mom had worked so hard to hide something that wasn't actually a secret. I'll think about it, I promised, though I'd already decided that Christmas Day would be when I revealed myself as their mysterious buyer. The closing proceeded smoothly the next day. I signed documents remotely, maintaining my anonymity until the final papers were recorded. By 3 p.m. on December 20th, I officially owned my childhood home. My agent handed me the keys with a bewildered smile. I've been in real estate for 20 years and never facilitated anything quite like this. I hope it brings your family some peace. Peace felt like a distant prospect given the Mitchell family dynamics, but I thanked her for her discretion and assistance. That evening, I drove past the house, half expecting to see a "sold" sign in the yard. Instead, everything looked exactly as it always had, Christmas lights twinkling along the roofline, the illuminated snowman decoration Dad put out every year standing sentinel by the front door. From the outside, nothing appeared to have changed. No one driving past would know that the house had just been sold, that the family inside was in financial crisis, that the daughter who'd just purchased the property was currently uninvited from their Christmas celebration. Appearances versus reality, the theme that had defined my relationship with my parents for years, continued to play out in perfect symmetry. My phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. I talked to Mom. She claims she never uninvited you from Christmas, just suggested you might be more comfortable skipping this year given the tension. Please come, 2 p.m. at my house. This rewriting of history was so typically Mom that I almost laughed. But Kayla's invitation seemed genuine, and the opportunity to reveal my secret at a family gathering rather than individually was too perfect to pass up. I'll be there, I replied, and I'm bringing a special gift. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. I wrapped the deed in silver paper with a simple blue bow, understated compared to Mom's typically elaborate gift presentations, but appropriate for what it contained. As I dressed for the gathering, I tried to imagine their reactions. Would Mom be angry that I'd gone behind her back? Would Dad be relieved? Would Kayla finally see the financial manipulation that had become our family's foundation? The answers would come soon enough. I placed the wrapped deed in a folder to keep it flat, tucked it into my bag, and headed to Kayla's house, keys to my new property, my parents' home, jingling in my pocket. The drive to Kayla and Tyler's house on Christmas Day felt surreal. Their neighborhood in Lake Oswego was exactly the kind of place my mother had always aspired to live. Gated community, manicured lawns, houses spaced far enough apart to suggest wealth, but close enough to flaunt it. I checked my appearance in Baati, the rearview mirror before turning into their driveway, suddenly aware of how ordinary I looked in my simple green sweater and jeans, compared to the formal Christmas attire my mother would undoubtedly be wearing. Kayla answered the door before I could ring the bell, wearing a red apron over a casual outfit that looked surprisingly similar to mine. "You came," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. I wasn't sure you would." "I said I would," I reminded her, returning the embrace. "And I brought gifts." Her eyes darted to the small gift bag in my hand, then back to my face. "Mom and Dad are already here. She's been tense." "When isn't she?" I tried to keep my tone light, but Kayla's expression told me she understood exactly what I meant. "Tyler's parents are coming later for dessert," she added, lowering her voice. "Including his dad. It might get awkward." So James Harrison would be witnessing my revelation as well. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more nerve-wracking. I followed Kayla into the expansive living room where a professionally decorated Christmas tree stretched nearly to the ceiling. Mom was arranging already opened presents into an artful display, likely for photos she would later post on social media. Dad sat silently on the couch, nursing what looked like whiskey despite the early hour. "Jessica," Mom said, not looking up from her task. "I'm glad you could fit us into your busy schedule." The passive-aggressive greeting was so expected that it almost made me smile. "Merry Christmas to you too, Mom." Dad stood, crossing the room to give me an awkward hug. "Merry Christmas, Jess," he whispered. His eyes were weary but held a glimmer of relief. The house sold. Closing was Friday. "I heard," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "Congratulations." "Not exactly a cause for celebration," Mom interjected, finally looking at me. "But at least we avoided foreclosure. No thanks to your financial advice." I bit back a sharp retort, reminding myself that the gift in my bag would say more than any argument could. Tyler emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers. "Jess, great to see you. Can I get you a drink? Wine? Champagne?" "Just water for now, thanks," I replied, noticing how his usual confidence seemed diminished. The tension between his father and mine had clearly affected him as well. As Tyler disappeared to fetch my water, Kayla guided me to the couch. "Should we do gifts while we wait for lunch to finish cooking?" Mom suddenly appeared interested. "Yes, let's. I have something special for each of you despite our circumstances." The way she emphasized the last word made it clear she was reminding everyone of the financial sacrifice she'd made to maintain gift-giving traditions. Kayla distributed packages from under the tree. Mom had given her an expensive-looking cashmere scarf, Tyler a monogrammed leather wallet, and Dad a watch that I suspected would be returned once the holiday was over. My gift was noticeably smaller, a gift card to a bookstore I rarely frequented. "Thank you," I said politely, tucking it into my purse. Very thoughtful. When it was my turn, I handed small packages to Kayla and Tyler. Artisanal chocolates for her, local craft beer for him. For Dad, I'd found a first edition copy of his favorite Raymond Chandler novel at a used bookstore. His eyes lit up when he unwrapped it. "This is wonderful, Jess. Thank you." I took a deep breath and pulled the silver-wrapped package from my bag. "This is for both you and Mom." Mom accepted it with a raised eyebrow. How economical to combine our gifts. I watched intently as she carefully unwrapped it, preserving the paper as she always did. Her expression changed from polite interest to confusion as she revealed the folder inside. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to reveal the deed. Dad leaned forward. "Is that?" "The deed to your house," I confirmed. "Or rather, my house now. I thought you might want to see the name of your buyer." Mom scanned the document, her face draining of color as she reached the signature line. "Mitchell Heritage Holdings, managed by Jessica Mitchell." She looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. "You? You bought our house?" The room fell silent. Tyler and Kayla exchanged glances, clearly trying to process this revelation. "You?" Mom repeated, her voice rising. "But how could you possibly afford—" "I've been investing wisely for years," I explained calmly. "Living below my means, maximizing my retirement contributions, building a diverse portfolio. You know, all those boring financial strategies you never wanted to discuss. Dad took the deed from Mom's limp hands, examining it as if to verify its authenticity. "The full asking price," he murmured. "Cash offer, the rental agreement." 6 months, rent-free, I confirmed, giving you time to figure out your next steps without pressure. Mom's shock was giving way to something else, a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. "Why didn't you tell us it was you? Why the secrecy?" The question was so laden with irony that I had to take a moment before responding. "Why didn't you tell me you were selling? Why make that decision without even calling me, after all I've done to try to help you navigate this situation?" "We didn't want to burden you," Dad offered weakly. "Burden me? Or face me? I think we both know which it really was." Kayla interjected, "I'm confused. If Jess bought the house, does that mean you don't have to move? You can stay there?" "For 6 months, apparently," Mom said, her voice brittle, "as renters in our own home." How generous. "It's not your home anymore, Mom," I said quietly. "It hasn't really been for years. Not since you mortgaged it to the hilt to maintain appearances. I'm offering you stability and time, which is more than the bank was willing to give." Mom stood abruptly. "I need some air." She walked quickly toward the back door, disappearing onto the patio. Dad stared at the deed in his hands. "I don't know what to say, Jess. Thank you doesn't seem adequate." "You could start with the truth," I suggested. "About everything. The extent of the business losses, the full arrangement with James Harrison, all of it. No more secrets. No more hiding reality behind a facade of success." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "My father's coming here today. He doesn't know I'm aware of his investment in your business, Mr. Mitchell." Dad's face paled. "He told you?" "No," Tyler admitted. "I overheard him on the phone with his lawyer a few months ago, discussing recouping losses from the Mitchell disaster, as he put it. I've been waiting for someone to be honest with me about what happened." The doorbell rang, interrupting this moment of potential honesty. Kayla jumped up. "That must be Tyler's parents." She shot me a pleading look. "Maybe we could pause this conversation until after they leave?" "Some things can't wait," I replied, standing. "And I think it's time everyone heard the truth, don't you?" Tyler nodded slowly. "I agree with Jess. I'm tired of the secrets." Kayla hesitated, then went to answer the door. Moments later, she returned with Tyler's parents, his mother Patricia, a slim woman with carefully maintained blonde hair, and his father James, whose commanding presence seemed to fill the room despite his average height. "Merry Christmas!" Patricia called out cheerfully, holding a bottle of champagne. "Where's Diane? I brought her favorite." "On the patio," Kayla explained. "She needed some fresh air." James surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on the deed still in my father's hands. "Robert," he acknowledged with a curt nod. "I understand congratulations are in order. Sold the house, I hear." Dad stood slowly, squaring his shoulders in a way I'd rarely seen. "Yes, to my daughter, actually." He gestured toward me. "James, you remember Jessica." James gave me a dismissive glance. "Of course, the financial advisor." He turned back to Dad. "Now that your housing situation is resolved, we should discuss the remainder of your obligation to me. Perhaps after the holiday?" The coldness in his tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Dad seemed to shrink before my eyes. "Actually," I interjected, stepping forward, "I think now is the perfect time to discuss it, especially since I'm the one who purchased the house and will be making decisions about any future financial arrangements involving that asset." James turned to me with new interest. "You're the buyer? Through some sort of company?" His tone suggested he found the idea implausible. "Mitchell Heritage Holdings," I confirmed. "A single-purpose LLC I created specifically for this transaction." Fascinating, James said, though his expression suggested it was anything but. And how does a young financial advisor acquire the capital for such a purchase? Before I could respond, Mom returned from the patio, her composure restored through sheer force of will. James, Patricia, Merry Christmas. I see you've heard our news. Patricia embraced her warmly. Diane, darling, I had no idea you were selling the house. Where will you go? Mom's smile remained fixed. We're exploring our options. Very exclusive. Options. The familiar pattern of deception was starting again. I caught Dad's eye and saw a flicker of something new there. Resignation, yes, but also a hint of resolve. Actually, he said, his voice stronger than before, we don't have options lined up yet. The truth is, we've been struggling financially for years. The business has been failing. We've been keeping up appearances by accumulating debt, and it finally caught up with us. Mom froze, her social smile still in place, but her eyes flashing warning signals at Dad. Robert, perhaps this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, he continued. I'm tired of the pretense, Diane. James knows the business failed. That's why he's been pressuring us about repayment. Tyler apparently knows. Jessica has been trying to help us face reality for months. The only people still living in denial are you and me, and I can't do it anymore. The room fell silent. Patricia looked uncomfortable, while James seemed almost pleased by my father's public admission of failure. Well, James said finally, I appreciate your honesty, Robert. Perhaps now we can discuss a realistic repayment plan for the outstanding $300,000, plus interest. I stepped forward. Before we discuss repayment, I'd like to understand the original investment agreement. Do you have documentation? James's expression hardened. This is between Robert and me. Family business. My family, I reminded him. And since I now own their primary asset, I have a vested interest in any claims against them that might affect their ability to maintain housing. Stability. Tyler moved to stand beside me. I'd like to see the agreement too, Dad. If you're going to continue pressuring the Mitchells while they're clearly in financial distress, I think everyone deserves to know exactly what was agreed to. James looked at his son with surprise. This is business, Tyler. Sometimes investments don't pay off. Is that what it was? Tyler pressed. A legitimate investment with proper documentation? Or was it a predatory loan disguised as an investment to take advantage of someone you knew was desperate? The accusation hung in the air. James's face flushed with anger. How dare you question my business practices? Because I've seen them. Firsthand, Tyler replied. The Dunham family restaurant chain, the Wilcox Construction Company, all businesses you invested in and then stripped for assets when they couldn't meet your impossible terms. I hadn't known about these other situations, but the pattern Tyler described aligned perfectly with what had happened to my father. Robert came to me, James insisted. He was looking for capital. I provided it, with clearly stated terms. Terms that ensured you'd either get a massive return or position yourself to take valuable assets when he failed, Tyler countered. You never expected the business to succeed. Patricia placed a hand on her husband's arm. James, perhaps we should go. This isn't the Christmas celebration we anticipated. Not yet, James said, shrugging off her touch. He turned to my father. I want a commitment today, Robert. With the proceeds from your house sale, you can make a substantial payment toward what you owe me. Dad looked helplessly toward me. I understood the position he was in. The house sale proceeds would barely cover the underwater mortgage, leaving almost nothing for debt repayment. There won't be much left after satisfying the mortgage, I explained to James. The house was significantly underwater. Then we'll need to discuss alternative repayment methods, James insisted. Perhaps your daughter would consider extending her generosity to cover your debt to me as well. His tone made it clear he found the idea laughable. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my next words. I would consider it, under certain conditions. Every head in the room turned toward me. Jess, no, Dad protested. This is my responsibility. Hear me out, I said, addressing James directly. I'll purchase your loan to my father at a discounted rate, reflecting the true risk involved and likelihood of repayment. James scoffed. Why would I accept less than what I'm owed? Because your alternative is pursuing collection from someone who has no assets and may need to file bankruptcy, I explained. In which case, you'd likely get nothing. A discounted buyout gives you immediate cash and resolves the situation cleanly. Tyler was watching me with newfound respect. She's right, Dad. It's a standard debt resolution approach. James seemed to be calculating his options. What discount are you proposing? 60%, I said confidently. I'll pay you $120,000 to purchase the full debt obligation. Absurd, James dismissed. I couldn't accept less than 80%. 65, I countered. And I'll need full documentation of the original agreement, proof of the capital, transfer, and a complete release of all claims against my parents. Mom, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this negotiation, suddenly found her voice. Jessica, what are you doing? You can't possibly afford to buy our house and pay off this debt. No one has that kind of money just sitting around. Her comment revealed how little she understood about personal finance, despite decades of projecting wealth. I've been preparing for opportunities like this for years, Mom. The house purchase required liquidating some investments, yes, but I maintain diversified assets and emergency funds precisely for situations where cash is needed quickly. James was studying me with new interest. Your daughter is quite the negotiator, Robert. 65%. $214,500. That's my final offer. $145,000, I replied firmly. And we sign the agreement today, with payment to follow once my arrival. Attorney reviews the documents. The room fell silent as James considered. Finally, he extended his hand. Done. I'll have my lawyer draw up the paperwork this week. We shook hands, sealing a deal that would finally free my parents from the most predatory of their financial obligations. Patricia looked bewildered by the turn of events. Does this mean we're staying for lunch after all? Kayla, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide eyes, let out a surprised laugh. I think we could all use a meal and some champagne. After this, lunch is ready whenever everyone's ready. As we moved toward the dining room, Mom pulled me aside. I don't understand, she whispered fiercely. Why would you do this? Buy our house, take on Robert's debt. What do you want in return? The question revealed how transactional she viewed relationships, even within family. Every gift came with expectations. Every act of generosity required reciprocation. I don't want anything in return, Mom. That's not why I did it. Everyone wants something, she insisted. No one just gives away hundreds of thousands of dollars without expecting something back. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw beyond the perfectly styled hair and designer outfit to the insecurity beneath. My mother had spent her entire adult life believing that worth was tied to wealth, that respect had to be purchased, that love was conditional on status. What I want, I said carefully, is for our family to heal, to build relationships based on honesty instead of appearances, to stop measuring success by what we own or how others perceive us. Mom's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That's a lovely sentiment, Jessica, but the real world doesn't work that way. People judge. Status matters. Only if we let it, I replied. I've watched you and Dad sacrifice your financial security, your peace of mind, and your integrity trying to impress people who don't actually care about you. Was it worth it? Before she could answer, Kayla called everyone to the table. The conversation over lunch was strained at first, but gradually relaxed as Tyler opened multiple bottles of wine, and Patricia proved surprisingly adept at directing conversation toward neutral topics. By the time dessert was served, an uneasy truce had settled over the gathering. James and my father had moved to discussing potential legitimate business opportunities rather than debt collection. Mom was explaining her interior design vision to Patricia, who seemed genuinely interested. Kayla caught my eye across the table and mouthed, "Thank you." As the Harrison family prepared to leave, James approached me. "I underestimated you, Jessica. Not many people can negotiate effectively with me." He handed me a business card. "If you're ever looking for a change, Harrison Investments could use someone with your financial acumen and backbone." I accepted the card politely, knowing I would never call. "Thank you, but I'm happy where I am." After they left, we helped Kayla and Tyler clean up. Dad seemed lighter than I'd seen him in years, despite the financial revelations and public admissions of failure. Mom was quieter than usual, seemingly lost in thought. "What happens now?" Kayla asked as we loaded the dishwasher. "With the house, I mean." "For the next 6 months, nothing changes," I explained. "Mom and Dad stay there, rent-free, while figuring out their next steps. After that, we reassess. And you just own our childhood home now." She shook her head, in disbelief. I still can't wrap my mind around it. "I'm preserving it, Kayla, keeping it in the family." I closed the dishwasher and turned to face her. The alternative was losing it completely. She hugged me suddenly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for the house, but for forcing everyone to be honest today." It was liberating. As I prepared to leave, Dad embraced me tightly. "I don't deserve what you did today," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I promise I'll try to be worthy of it going forward." "Just be honest from now on," I told him. "With me, with Mom, with yourself, that's all I ask." Mom's goodbye was more reserved, but there was a new quality to her gaze, something like respect, perhaps even a hint of admiration. "We should have dinner this week," she suggested. "Just the two of us. There are things I'd like to discuss." Driving home that night, I reflected on how differently the day had unfolded from what I'd anticipated. I had expected shock, yes, but also anger, accusations, perhaps even rejection. Instead, there had been the first glimmers of genuine gratitude, honesty, and potential healing. The house keys felt heavy in my pocket, a tangible reminder of how completely my relationship with my parents had transformed. I was no longer just their daughter. I was now their landlord, their creditor, their financial protector. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Would this change lead to the honest relationship I hoped for, or would it create new complications? Only time would tell. But for the first time in years, I felt cautiously optimistic about our family's future. 3 days later, I met Mom for dinner at a modest Italian restaurant downtown. Her suggestion, which surprised me given her usual preference for trendy, expensive venues where she might be seen by her social circle. She arrived on time, dressed more simply than I could remember seeing her in years. As we settled into our booth, I noticed she wasn't wearing any of her usual statement jewelry. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas," she began, after we'd ordered, "about appearances and reality and what truly matters." I waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. "When your father and I bought that house 28 years ago, it was a stretch financially. But I was determined to live in the right neighborhood, to give you girls the right kind of upbringing." She traced the rim of her water glass thoughtfully. "Somewhere along the way, the appearance of success became more important than actual security." This level of self-awareness was unprecedented from my mother. "What changed your perspective?" I asked gently. "Watching you," she admitted. seeing how you've built real financial strength without showing it off. And then Christmas Day, when you revealed what you'd done. It made me realize I've been teaching the wrong lessons all these years. She reached across the table and took my hand, another rare gesture. I'm not saying I can change overnight. These habits are deeply ingrained, but I want to try. For myself, for your father, and for our relationship. Her sincerity was palpable, and I found myself blinking, back unexpected tears. I'd like that, Mom. I have a proposal, she continued. Your father and I have been talking. We don't need that big house anymore, not really. What if we look for a smaller place now, something more appropriate for retirement, something we can actually afford? Are you sure? I asked, genuinely surprised by this suggestion. You love that house. I loved what I thought it said about us, she corrected. But staying there now, knowing it's only possible because of your sacrifice, it doesn't feel right anymore. I'd rather make a clean break, start fresh with a realistic lifestyle. We spent the rest of dinner discussing possibilities. Condos near the river, small houses in quieter neighborhoods, even the option of relocating to a less expensive area outside Portland. For the first time, Mom seemed genuinely engaged with the practical aspects of financial planning rather than dismissing them as beneath her concern. As we said goodbye in the parking lot, she hugged me tightly. I don't think I've ever properly thanked you, she said quietly. Not just for the house and the debt, but for trying to help us see reality all along. I'm sorry it took such drastic measures for me to listen. Better late than never, I replied, returning her embrace. We'll figure this out together. Driving home that night, I realized that the true gift of buying my parents' house hadn't been preserving a physical structure, but creating space for a new foundation, one built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine connection rather than appearances and financial dependency. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Decades of financial habits couldn't be changed overnight, and the road to true family healing would likely include setbacks along with progress. But for the first time in years, we were walking that road together, eyes open to both the challenges and possibilities that lay ahead. Sometimes, I reflected, the most valuable assets aren't those that appear on a balance sheet or property deed. They're the moments of truth that allow us to see ourselves and each other clearly, and the courage to build something authentic from that clarity, a legacy more meaningful than any house could ever be. 6 months passed more quickly than any of us expected. Spring brought new growth to the garden my father had always tended with such care, and summer arrived with its long golden evenings perfect for sitting on the back porch, a simple pleasure my parents had rarely taken time to enjoy when appearances and social obligations ruled their calendar. I had dinner with them at least once a week during this transition period, watching with quiet satisfaction as they gradually embraced a more authentic way of living. Dad had officially closed his failing construction business and, with my encouragement, started a small consulting practice advising homeowners on renovation projects. The work was steady but not overwhelming, allowing him time to rediscover hobbies he'd abandoned years ago: woodworking, fishing, even playing the guitar he'd kept in the closet since before I was born. Mom's transformation was even more remarkable. Initially, I'd worried that losing the social status associated with their house and lifestyle would send her into a depression. Instead, she seemed to be shedding layers of anxiety with each possession she decided not to keep. She started volunteering at a local community garden, something she would have considered beneath her just months earlier. When I commented on this change, she surprised me with her candor. I spent decades believing that worth came from what you owned and who you knew, she explained as we sorted through kitchen items she no longer needed. It was exhausting, Jessica. Always comparing, always worried someone might see behind the curtain. I feel lighter now. Not everything was smooth, of course. There were difficult conversations about finances, tense moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, occasional comments that revealed how deeply ingrained their previous mindset had been. but the trajectory was undeniably positive. The 6-month mark approached. We needed to make decisions about the house. My original plan had been to sell it once my parents relocated, using the proceeds to replenish my depleted investment accounts. But watching them transform within those familiar walls made me reconsider. One evening in late June, I invited Kayla to meet me for coffee at a quiet cafe near my office. Our relationship had evolved too, growing from the polite distance we'd maintained as adults into something resembling genuine friendship. "How are they really doing?" she asked after we'd settled at a corner table. "Mom puts on a good front, but I can't always tell what's beneath the surface." "Better than I expected, honestly," I replied. "Dad seems happier than I've seen him in years. Mom is adapting. She still has moments of status anxiety, but they're becoming less frequent." Kayla nodded thoughtfully. I noticed she actually wore the same outfit twice to our last 2 Sunday dinners. The old Diane Mitchell would rather have died. We shared a knowing laugh, both recognizing how significant such a small change really was for our mother. "They've been looking at condos," I continued. "There's one near Forest Park they really like. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, maintenance included. It's within their new budget, especially with Dad's consulting income picking up." "And the ISI house?" Kayla asked. "Are you really going to sell it?" I hesitated, then shared the idea that had been forming in my mind. "Actually, I've been thinking about something different. What would you think about turning it into a family asset instead?" Her eyebrows raised with interest. "What kind of asset?" "A rental property, but with purpose. Portland has that new program for healthcare workers relocating to the area. They're struggling to find affordable housing. We could offer the house at slightly below market rate to a medical family. Maybe a doctor or nurse with children who could enjoy the backyard, the good school district." "We?" Kayla questioned. "You mean you? You bought the house, Jess. It's your decision." "I was thinking we could make it a joint venture," I explained. "You and Tyler have capital from selling your Lake Oswego place." They had recently downsized as well, though for different reasons. Tyler had left his father's business to start his own financial consulting firm, helping family businesses create sustainable succession plans. "I could transfer partial ownership to you," I continued. "We'd share the management responsibilities and any profits. It would be an investment in something meaningful, not just financial returns." Kayla was quiet for a moment, turning her coffee cup slowly between her palms. "You'd really want to do this together, after everything that happened?" "Because of everything that happened," I corrected gently. "This house has been a source of both pain and healing for our family. I think it could serve a similar purpose for someone else, providing stability during a transitional time in their lives." 2 days later, Kayla called to say she and Tyler were interested. A week after that, the 3 of us met with a real estate attorney to structure an equitable partnership agreement. By August, the transformation was underway. Necessary updates to the property, research into the healthcare housing program, development of a management plan that would allow us to be hands-on landlords without it becoming a second job. Throughout this process, I kept my parents informed but made it clear the decisions were ours to make. This wasn't about excluding them, but about establishing a new pattern where their adult daughters could collaborate as equals rather than caretakers. In early September, just as the first leaves were beginning to turn, Mom and Dad closed on their new condo. The moving process was bittersweet, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what truly mattered enough to bring into their new life. I spent several weekends helping them, often uncovering forgotten treasures, buried beneath the status symbols that had once seemed so important. "Remember this?" Dad asked one afternoon, holding up a shoebox filled with seashells. From that summer, we rented the little cabin on the Oregon coast. You girls were maybe 7 and 5. I did remember. One of the few family vacations we'd taken that wasn't about appearances or social connections. We'd spent days combing the beach for treasures, evenings playing board games when the coastal fog rolled in. It had been simple, authentic joy. "We should have done more of that," Mom said quietly, running her fingers over a particularly delicate shell. "Less country club, more seashell collecting." "It's not too late," I reminded her. "Your new place is closer to the coast than this house was. Weekend trips would be easy." The actual moving day arrived with unexpected emotion. Standing in the empty living room where we'd celebrated birthdays, opened Christmas presents, and ultimately confronted hard truths, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and hope. This house had been both a prison of expectations and the setting for our family's most honest moments. Mom appeared beside me, her hand finding mine. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for buying the house when we needed it most, but for helping us see that it was just a house, not a measure of our worth." Dad joined us, placing an arm around each of our shoulders. We stood there in silence for a long moment, three people who had journeyed from financial pretense to authentic connection within these walls. "Ready for the next chapter?" he finally asked, jingling the keys to their new condo. Mom took a deep breath and nodded. "More than ready." As they drove away to begin settling into their new home, Kayla arrived with paint samples and measuring tape. We spent the afternoon planning renovations, debating color schemes, and envisioning how the house might serve its new purpose. "It's strange," she commented as we sat on the back steps, watching the sunset paint the empty backyard in shades of gold. A year ago, this place represented everything I thought success looked like. Now I see it so differently. "How so?" I asked. "Now it feels like potential. A tool for doing something meaningful rather than just showing off." She bumped my shoulder gently with hers. "You taught me that, by buying this place not as a status symbol but as a solution." October brought our first potential tenants, a pediatric surgeon relocating from Minnesota with her husband and twin 6-year-old daughters. Dr. Emma Castillo had accepted a position at the Children's Hospital, while her husband Marco, a graphic designer, could work remotely. They had been struggling to find suitable housing within their budget, especially with the additional costs of relocating across the country. Showing them through the newly renovated house, watching the girls excitedly explore the backyard and claim bedrooms, I felt a sense of rightness that confirmed we'd made the good decision. This family wasn't looking for a showpiece. They wanted a home where they could build a life, create memories, feel secure during a major transition. "The schools in this area are excellent," I told them as we sat in the freshly painted living room. "And there's a great pediatrician just 5 minutes away. I know because she was my doctor growing up in this very house." Their surprise at this revelation led to sharing more of our family's story, an abbreviated version that emphasized the house's role in our journey from appearances to authenticity. That's why we decided to participate in the healthcare housing initiative instead of maximizing rental income, I explained. We wanted this place to serve a purpose beyond financial return. Dr. Castillo nodded thoughtfully. "That resonates with me. I could have gone into private practice, made more money, but working at a children's hospital, being there for families, during their most vulnerable moments, that's the kind of wealth that matters." They signed the lease that afternoon. 2 weeks later, on a crisp fall Saturday, Kayla and I watched from across the street as they moved in, the twins darting excitedly between boxes, Marco directing movers while Emma arranged kitchen essentials. The house already felt different, energized by possibility rather than burdened by pretense. "We should invite Mom and Dad to dinner to celebrate," Kayla suggested as we walked back to our cars. "Show them pictures of the new family. Let them see what their house has become." The dinner that evening at my downtown apartment was unlike any family gathering I could remember from our childhood. We ordered takeout instead of Mom preparing an elaborate meal designed to impress. We ate at my small dining table rather than setting formal places with the good china. Conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by genuine laughter instead of carefully curated anecdotes meant to highlight success. "I have something to show you," I said after we'd finished eating. I opened my laptop and pulled up photos of the Castillo family moving into the house. "Your house has new occupants." Mom leaned forward, studying the images with interest. "Those little girls look about the age you two were when we first moved in." "Emma's a pediatric surgeon," Kayla explained. "Marco's a graphic designer. They moved here from Minnesota for her position at the Children's Hospital." "A doctor," Mom noted, and I braced myself for a comment about status or connections. Instead, she surprised me. "I hope they'll be happy there. It's a good house for children." Dad scrolled through the photos, smiling at one that showed the, twins racing across the backyard. "Remember that tire swing I hung from the oak tree? Looks like it's still there. Those girls will love it." "Actually," I said, "Marco asked if you might be willing to show him how to build a treehouse in that oak. The girls have been begging for one, but he's not very handy." Dad's face lit up. "I'd be happy to help. I've still got all my tools in storage, just need a project to use them on. And I could advise on curtains for those girls' rooms," Mom offered spontaneously. "If they'd like, of course. No pressure. Just, those windows get such lovely morning light. The right curtains would make it magical for children." Kayla caught my eye across the table, her expression mirroring my own surprise and delight at these offers. Not to impress or control, but simply to contribute something meaningful. The first year of our new arrangement brought unexpected joys and challenges. The Castillo family thrived in the house, with Emma excelling at her new position and the girls settling happily into school. Dad did indeed help Marco build that treehouse, a project that rekindled his passion for construction in its purest form, creating something that brought joy rather than status. Mom developed a warm relationship with Emma, occasionally watching the twins when hospital emergencies arose and offering not judgment but support. Kayla and Tyler welcomed their first child, a boy they named Ethan, and found that their decision to downsize had created space in their lives for what truly mattered. Tyler's new consulting business flourished precisely because he approached family businesses with authenticity rather than his father's predatory tactics. As for me, I declined that VP position at Evergreen Financial in favor of staying where I was, though with adjusted priorities. I began developing a specialty in helping clients align their financial decisions with their core values, often sharing elements of my own family's journey as illustration. This approach attracted clients who were seeking not just wealth accumulation, but meaningful financial well-being, a niche that proved both professionally fulfilling and financially rewarding. Mom and Dad settled comfortably into their condo, gradually building a lifestyle based on genuine interests rather than appearances. Dad joined a local musicians group where he played his long-neglected guitar with fellow retirees. Mom surprised everyone by taking a part-time position at a small interior design firm, applying her aesthetic sense in service to others rather than as a display of status. The rental income from the house, while intentionally below market rate, still provided a steady return on our investment. More importantly, it created a framework for Kayla and me to collaborate as equal partners, strengthening our relationship in ways I'd never thought possible. We occasionally disagreed about management decisions, but those conversations were productive rather than divisive, each of us bringing different strengths to the partnership. When the Castillos renewed their lease for a second year, we celebrated with a backyard barbecue at the house, a gathering that included both our family and theirs in a natural mingling that felt like the best kind of community. Watching Mom teach the twins how to arrange flowers cut from the garden while Dad and Marco discussed improvements to the treehouse, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with financial success. "You look pleased with yourself," Kayla commented, joining me at the edge of the patio while bouncing baby Ethan on her hip. "Not with myself," I corrected. "With us. With what we've all become." She nodded, understanding without further explanation. It's funny how things work. Out. A year and a half ago, Mom banned you from Christmas for being poor, not knowing you had the resources to buy their house. Now here we are, with a completely different definition of wealth. Speaking of Christmas, I said, I was thinking, we might host it at the house this year. Not to reclaim old territory, but to create something new. The Castillos will be visiting family in Minnesota, so the place will be empty. We could invite Mom and Dad, you and Tyler and Ethan, maybe even Aunt Nancy. I love that idea, Kayla agreed. But simple, right? No status Christmas like the old days? Definitely simple, I confirmed. Potluck dinner, modest gifts, maybe some board games afterward. Christmas about connection, not consumption. That Christmas gathering became a new tradition, one based on presence rather than presence, on genuine joy rather than performative happiness. The house that had once been the backdrop for so much financial pretense became, for one day each year, the setting for an authentic celebration of what we'd learned about true wealth. On one such Christmas Eve, now 3 years after that fateful holiday when I'd revealed myself as the buyer of my parents' house, Mom pulled me aside as others were engaged in a spirited game of charades. "I've been meaning to tell you something," she said, leading me to the quiet of the kitchen. "I found an old journal of mine recently from when your father and I first bought this house. Do you know what my biggest fear was back then?" I shook, my head, curious. That someone would discover we could barely afford it. That we were stretching ourselves to the breaking point to maintain appearances. She smiled sadly. I spent 30 years afraid people would discover I wasn't as wealthy or successful as I pretended to be. All that energy wasted on fear, when I could have been building something real. "But you understand that now," I reminded her gently. "That's what matters." She nodded, her eyes bright with emotion. "Because of you. You showed me that true wealth isn't about what you own or how others perceive you. It's about having the resources, financial and emotional, to live authentically and help others do the same." From the living room came a burst of laughter as Dad apparently performed a particularly hilarious charade. Mom squeezed my hand before we rejoined the others. "Best investment I ever made," I whispered to myself, looking around at my family. Not perfect, still occasionally struggling with old patterns, but fundamentally transformed by the decision to value substance over appearance, authenticity over impression. The house that had once symbolized status anxiety now represented something entirely different, a testament to the possibility of change, the power of facing reality, and the unexpected ways that financial decisions can heal rather than divide, when guided by the right values. As midnight approached and we prepared to exchange our modest gifts, I found myself filled with a quiet contentment that no designer handbag or luxury vacation could have provided. My net worth on paper might have been temporarily reduced by the decision to buy my parents' house, but my life had been immeasurably enriched by what that purchase made possible. The transformation of a family bound by financial pretense into one connected by authentic love and mutual respect. Some might look at our story and see only the financial transaction at its center. A daughter with unexpected resources rescuing parents from their financial mistakes. But I knew the truth was more complex and beautiful. In the process of buying their house, I had helped free all of us from the prison of appearances. In securing their physical shelter, I had created space for emotional healing. In becoming their landlord on paper, I had paved the way for us to meet as equals in reality. 5 years after that pivotal Christmas, our family's transformation continues to unfold in ways I never could have anticipated. Dad has become a mentor to young carpenters learning traditional woodworking techniques. Mom serves on the board of a nonprofit providing housing assistance to families in transition. Kayla and Tyler have welcomed a second child and structured. Their work lives to prioritize family time over financial maximization. The Castillo family eventually purchased their own home closer to the hospital, but we've maintained a friendship that transcends the landlord-tenant relationship. Our house, for it will always be our house in my mind, now provides a home for a refugee family building a new life in Portland, continuing its evolution from status symbol to sanctuary. As for me, I've never regretted the financial sacrifice that purchase required. I eventually bought a small bungalow of my own, choosing character and comfort over size and show. My investment portfolio recovered more quickly than expected, allowing me to establish a small foundation that provides financial literacy education to young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds. When people ask me about the turning point in my life, I often think back to that Christmas when I was banned for being poor while actually holding the deed to my parents' house. The irony still makes me smile, but the lesson runs deeper than mere contradiction. It reminds me that true wealth exists in the courage to value authenticity over appearance, substance over status, and the willingness to invest not just in property, but in the people and relationships that give life its deepest meaning. In the end, some investments can't be measured in dollars and cents or captured on a balance sheet. They're calculated instead by the profound shifts in how we understand ourselves and relate to others, by the freedom that comes from aligning our external choices with our internal values, and by the legacy we create not through what we own, but through how wholly and authentically we live. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.